On the one hand, voluntarism promotes strong religious loyalties among those who are religious. Choosing a faith and having to defend that choice in a diverse society is likely to strengthen commitment. On the other hand, another implication is that religious groups become dependent largely on the voluntary support of their constituents, and hence must accommodate themselves to many of the cultural values that their constituents pick up from non-religious sources. And granted, there's good evidence that successful religious groups need to challenge, change, and shape constituents' lives in some respects. Otherwise, why bother with religion? But at the same time, if the challenges are too radical or too demanding, people will leave that religion and find one more suited to their taste. That means that prophetic stances are likely to gain only limited support in this competitive market of voluntary religion. Leading American religious groups are not likely to successfully challenge capitalism, materialism, or nationalism, even though many leaders, religious leaders, may speak out on such topics. The inability of most churches to deal with the issues of slavery or racism are other clear examples. If churches, denominations, or religious groups took strong stands, they split and they lost members. In this respect, I would highly recommend a wonderful documentary called A Time for Burning. It's about the failure of a Missouri Synod Lutheran congregation in Omaha in the 1960s in a very modest effort to challenge racial integration. My colleague John McGreevy recounts similar stories for many Catholic parishes. That American culture is simultaneously one of the most religious places on earth and also one of the most secular. American religious groups have an incalculable influence on the lives of countless individuals, reshaping and disciplining them in many ways that have huge cultural implications, even if those influences are difficult to isolate and to measure. At the same time, however, those influences are limited by other cultural forces, loyalties, beliefs, and assumptions that religious commitments can only more rarely change. These much broader contexts, then, regarding voluntary religion and culture help us understand the role of evangelicalism in America. I'm defining evangelicalism conventionally as Christians in a revivalist tradition who have emphasized the Bible as the supremely reliable authority, the necessity of being born again based on the redemptive work of Jesus Christ, and the importance of actively sharing that good news with others in evangelism and missions. Based in many denominations, independent organizations, and local churches, evangelicalism has long been wonderfully attuned to the voluntarism of the American religious free market. Not only do evangelicals emphasize personal, heartfelt appropriation of the faith, but also that believers should be aggressive in sharing their faith with others. Hence, it is a people's movement that is immensely resilient and can grow even while lacking strong institutions. Institutions are typically local churches, small denominations, and ad hoc agencies for missions, evangelism, publication, and education. Many evangelicals belong to larger mainline denominations that are divided internally and in which evangelicals represent only one minority voice. Even in areas where evangelicals have been most influential culturally, as in the North before the Civil War and in the South afterward, they have been only one of many types of Protestant. They themselves have been internally divided by doctrine, region, class, race, and degree of sectarianism. And evangelical leaders are often competing stars. The chances of speaking collectively in this divided and internally competitive atmosphere seem small. Viable as evangelicalism at all. A large part of the answer seems to be related to the phenomenon that America's voluntary free market religious economy has not only a centrifugal force, that would invite countless variations and innovations. But it also has a centripetal force that creates remarkable de facto unity on some matters. One can enter an evangelical church from Maine to California or from Minnesota to Alabama, and the chances will be that you'll hear the same songs projected on similar overheads, and you'll hear almost identical prayers, even though these churches have no institutional connection and come from very widely diverse evangelical traditions. The free market creates a de facto unity, as what works in one place works in another. Furthermore, despite fine points of denominational differences, one can expect to hear much the same core message taught. Moreover, unlike the music and technology, this message will not be simply a product of recent American cultural ideals, though it is that to some extent, but will also be identifiably in the evangelical tradition. And perhaps what is most remarkable is in this free market is that the basic message will be something that George Whitefield, John Wesley, or Alexander Campbell could at least recognize. So despite the fact that on the fringes, innovators and hucksters are constantly inventing new doctrines and emphases, in the great majority of churches, a core tradition survives. Have unhelpfully lumped all of American evangelicals together as fundamentalists. Furthermore, many of them conflate American fundamentalist traits with some of the parallel traits that they see in militant Islam. Although there are some obvious parallels, the differences between American evangelicals and militant Islamicists are far more useful for understanding either side than the supposed equation. One instance of such confusion is that many alarmist interpreters point out that politically fundamentalistic evangelicals often employ a rhetoric about taking the nation back for Christ and reestablishing God's law as the law of the land. The interpreters then typically relate that rhetoric to the doctrines of a tiny subgroup that teaches a Reconstructionist or Dominion theology that advocates not only turning America into a Christian theocracy, but reinstating Old Testament law. If, however, one looks at evangelicalism as a force shaped by dependence on many broader American cultural ideals over many generations, finally attuned to its environment, then one can readily see the weakness in this alarmist equation.